Your toddler just destroyed the living room again, and your first thought is probably, what is wrong with my child? But after speaking with a developmental psychologist with 26 years of experience, I learned that we are asking the wrong question. The children we label as difficult, defiant, or too much are often showing the strongest early markers of high cognitive potential. You might not be raising a problem, you might be raising a genius. Here are the 5 signs most parents miss and actively punish by mistake. By sign number 3, everything your toddler does will suddenly make sense. Sign 1, they break rules with a reason. Every toddler breaks rules. That part is universal. So when your child grabs the thing they were told not to touch, that by itself is not a sign of anything. What matters is what happens in the moment after. A 2017 longitudinal study from Vanderbilt University tracked over 400 toddlers across an 18-month observation window, watching how each child responded when caught violating a rule. The researchers were not looking at whether the child broke the rule. They all did. They were looking at whether the child, when asked, could produce a reason for it. Most could not. Most repeated the action. Most cried. Most stared blankly. The children the researchers flagged as significant were the ones who answered the question, not with sophisticated answers, but with a reason, because it was in the wrong place, because she was not using it, because I wanted to know what would happen if I did it twice. The researchers called this intentional rule violation and distinguished it from impulsive rule violation, which is what most toddlers do. From the outside, both children look identical. They both touch the thing. The difference is internal. The intentional violator has done something that should be developmentally impossible at age 2 or 3. They have evaluated a rule, weighed it against their own judgment, and made a deliberate choice. That is not bad behavior. That is the earliest observable form of independent reasoning a human brain is capable of producing. By age 6, the children flagged as intentional rule violators in toddlerhood were significantly outperforming their peers in measures of executive function and abstract problem solving. The toddlers who had been the easiest to manage showed no such advantage. The defiance that drove parents to exhaustion was the same neural process that, 2 years later, was producing measurable cognitive gains. So what do? Stop punishing the reason, start asking for it. The next time your child breaks a rule, kneel down and ask why. Listen to the answer without correcting it. The reasoning is the muscle. Every time you let them use it, it gets stronger. Sign 2. They ask why until you run out of answers. There is a specific kind of exhaustion the parents of intellectually advanced toddlers describe with a uniformity that researchers eventually had to take seriously. It is not the exhaustion of physical caregiving. It is the exhaustion of being intellectually outpaced by someone who cannot yet fasten their own shoes. A 2019 study from MIT spent 2 years documenting question-asking behavior in toddlers inside their natural home environments. The researchers were measuring what kind of questions. The ratio of identification questions, what is that, to causal questions, why does that happen, and what would happen if it did not. The first asks for a label. The second asks the world to explain itself. The questions are not interruptions. They are the architecture of intelligence forming itself in real time. The MIT data found something striking. Toddlers who asked causal questions at significantly elevated rates, even when those questions were repetitive, even when they appeared unanswerable, showed accelerated structural development in the prefrontal regions of the brain associated with hypothesis formation, abstract reasoning, and predictive modeling. The questions were not just questions, they were the brain physically building itself. This is why the toddler who refuses to accept because I said so is not being disrespectful. Their cognitive architecture is structurally incapable of processing that response as a satisfying answer. It demands a chain, and the parent who eventually says, "I do not know, but let us look it up together," has just delivered the most important piece of information that brain can receive. That curiosity has somewhere to go. So what do? Retire the phrase "because I said so." Replace it with "let us find out." You do not need to know the answer. You need to model the search. The child who watches you look something up learns that not knowing is the beginning of knowing, not the end of it. Sign 3. They destroy things in order to understand them. The drawer emptied for the 5th time this week. The remote control somehow disassembled before you walked back into the room. The shelf reorganized into a system you cannot recognize and your child cannot quite explain. From the outside, this looks like one thing. From inside the brain doing it, it is something else entirely. Researchers studying exploratory drive in early childhood have been documenting this behavior for over 30 years. Children who engage in high rates of object deconstruction in toddlerhood, taking things apart, testing how pieces fit, reorganizing systems by their own internal logic, score significantly higher on later measures of spatial reasoning, mechanical aptitude, and creative problem solving than children who do not. A landmark study from the University of Chicago drew a critical critical distinction between two visually identical behaviors. Random destruction is a child throwing or breaking objects with no clear pattern. Systematic deconstruction is a child taking something apart with focus, often for an unusually long period of time, and showing interest in what they have produced. The first is impulse, the second is investigation, and the second is one of the strongest early predictors of analytical reasoning the researchers have ever measured. What you are calling destruction is, from inside that small brain, the closest thing to engineering it knows how to perform. The difference between destruction and investigation only becomes visible afterward. Watch what your child does in the moments after. Do they walk away? Or do they study what they have made? Do they try to put it back together? Do they bring it to you with an expression that is closer to curiosity than to guilt? If you have been finding pieces in places they do not belong, arranged in patterns you cannot quite identify, you have been raising a child running their own laboratory, with no funding, no equipment, and no supervisor who knew what they were watching. So what do? Give them something they are allowed to take apart. An old keyboard, a broken radio, a box of safe parts. The drive does not go away when you say no. It just finds a target you would have preferred it leave alone. Sign 4. They have a sense of fairness that is almost impossible to negotiate with. The meltdown over what looked like nothing. The complete inability to move past the moment another child was treated unfairly, even when your child was not the one affected. The disproportionate, fierce, almost obsessive reaction to a situation the adults in the room have already decided is too small to matter. Developmental psychologists at the Yale Infant Cognition Center have spent years studying when moral reasoning first emerges in early childhood. Toddlers who demonstrate intense early reactions to perceived injustice, especially injustice that does not directly affect them, are showing advanced development in what cognitive scientists call theory of mind. The capacity to model what another person is experiencing, to feel something on their behalf, to track moral state in a situation that has nothing to do with the self. This is one of the most cognitively expensive things a human brain ever learns to do. Most adults perform it imperfectly. A 2-year-old who collapses in tears because someone else was treated wrongly is demonstrating a level of social and moral processing that is not supposed to be available to them yet. The intensity of the reaction is the marker. A child whose moral architecture is still forming lets things go. A child whose moral architecture has already come online cannot, even when it costs them, even when it embarrasses you, even when the situation has nothing to do with them at all. The meltdown is not the price of being difficult. It is the price of caring about something most adults still cannot see. So what do? Do not dismiss the feeling. Name it. Tell them you see what they saw, that you understand why it hurt. The meltdown shrinks the moment a child realizes the injustice was witnessed by someone other than them. Sign 5. They are exhausting in exactly one very specific way. They do not need to be entertained. They need to be challenged. And the moment they are not given a challenge of sufficient complexity, they manufacture one out of whatever materials happen to be available in the room, which is usually your patience, your boundaries, and every plant, vase, and electrical outlet within reach of a child who was not built for boredom. Researchers at Johns Hopkins identified what they called the stimulation threshold as the single most consistent neurological signature of a high cognitive potential child in the first 3 years of life. The threshold refers to the level of environmental complexity required for the child to enter a state of regulated calm. Average toddlers reach that state through ordinary play. Children with elevated cognitive potential require significantly more variables, more novelty, more cognitive load. They are not hyperactive. They are an engine running at full speed in a parking lot. When that engine is given nothing to do, it does what every high-performance system does in the absence of a task. It generates one. The chaos you have been managing is not a malfunction. It is your child's brain solving the problem of an understimulating environment using the only resources available. If your toddler has felt impossible to tire out, impossible to occupy, impossible to satisfy with the toys that work on every other child you know, you are not failing. You are watching the cognitive equivalent of a sports car being asked to live in a school zone. So what do? Raise the bar, not the volume. Puzzles 2 years above their age. Real tools, real tasks, real responsibility in small doses. The chaos disappears the moment the brain finds something heavy enough to lift. None of this means the behavior does not need shaping. It does. A high-capacity mind without structure produces a different kind of problem, one that surfaces later and is much harder to repair. But the difference between guiding intelligence into appropriate expression and spending 3 years trying to extinguish it is enormous, and most parents are never given the framework to know which one they are doing. The toddler taking apart the cabinet is not defying you. They are running an experiment you do not have the equipment to observe. The toddler asking the same question for the 4th time is not testing your patience. Their brain has not finished building the model that question is part of. The toddler melting down over an injustice you are ready to move past is operating at a moral resolution still rare among adults. You're not raising a problem. You may be raising a mind that has been asking since the day it could move whether anyone was going to see it. If you recognized your child in any of these signs, leave a comment with the number that hit closest to home, and subscribe so the next part of this research finds you, because the years when intelligence looks the most like chaos are the years that decide what it eventually becomes. And if you want to understand why these same children, the ones dismantling cabinets and demanding causal answers and crying over injustice, are often the ones who struggle the most when they enter traditional preschool, that video is next.